Hey Flock, Mike here from Epic Duck Studios, and welcome to the Epic Hobbies Paint by Numbers. This is Cypher Lords Part 3, where I'll be focusing on the steel-colored or the silver-colored metallic aspects. So in this model, that's going to be the chest armor, the shoulder pad, and then of course the swords. So if we look at the box art, we've got basically two distinct things we're going to be doing. We've got the chest armor here and the shoulder pad, and these are very clearly just washed with a black or a dark gray. It might be basilicanum gray. We're going to be trying Nuln oil gloss for this today. But then when you look at the sword, we've got a very different look. So we've got this purple glint happening to it. And you can see that over here as well. And so I'm going to be doing my best to emulate that. I'm going to be using the Druchii Violet wash for that. So I'm going to start by giving all of those areas a base coat of Iron Breaker. Now I realize this is a layer paint, but I wanted something that's a little bit brighter than starting with Leadbelcher, for example. And Iron Breaker is what I've got, so that's what I'm going to work with. So I'm going to start with the armor because it's the more detailed area and a little bit harder to reach as well. You know, it's got finished details around it, whereas the swords are kind of just standalone. I don't have to worry about bumping into anything with them. So we're going to start with the hardest part first and then work backwards. Now here you see sort of the danger in pre-thinning your Citadel metals is they don't actually take really well to it. You can see as I brush over this area where I've got a little bit of skin up on the collar, it's just not, I mean, it's being tinted metallic, but you can definitely see the little bit of skin tone through it. You know, since I made the video where I transferred my Citadel paints to dropper bottles, I've really learned the metallics aren't a great candidate for it. You know, the regular base and layer paints do quite well transferred to a dropper bottle, and even, you know, slightly pre-thinned, but it almost works against the metallics. They lose a lot of their ability to do their job well once they've been pre-thinned. So you can see, you know, that's, you know, a lot of the primer is showing through there, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I am looking for, you know, a nice, reliable, even base coat, and we're not going to really get that here, and that's my own fault. That's because I've pre-thinned that paint with a little bit of, I used Liquitex Flow Aid, and it just didn't quite do the job I wanted to do. Again, it works great with, you know, any of the other base paints. Like, for example, I use my Corn Red and Mephiston Red like this, and they've been absolutely wonderful from these dropper bottles. Averland Sunset as well. A lot of my base colors I use this way, but it just doesn't seem to work well with metallics. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to pick up one of my non-GW metallics, simply because it's a close match that I haven't, you know, fiddled around with yet. So I'm going to be using just some Warcolours metallic pewter instead. But again, you can just substitute in your Leadbelcher, or even if you want to go down to using an Iron Breaker and have it be a little darker, that's okay too. You can already see the difference in coverage is basically night and day. And again, that's not a negative against Citadel paints, that's a negative against putting the metallics in dropper bottles. Because really, to get them transferred well, you have to add some thinning agent. And the metals just don't really love being thinned. They just don't work as well. So I'm just working on the collar sort of area of the armor here, doing the best I can to not accidentally get any on her skin. And then sort of just the underarm here as well. Then I'm going to just bring that same base coat up onto the shoulder armor. And even though you can't really see it, you want to make sure you do the underside of the armor as well. Now here's where things get a little bit tricky, because you've got these little straps coming off. I'm not even sure what this one just kind of goes all the way over to the clothing on the front. So just want to make sure we, you know, ideally don't paint those. I guess it doesn't really matter too much, because you can just paint over them with whatever color the strap ends up being. I believe it's black. And again, we just finish up this shoulder pad. I might want to let this paint just set for a minute and give it a second coat. I do find with metallics, it's also good to just give the paint a little time to dry. Otherwise, you risk sort of pushing your metal flake around the model, and it doesn't behave as nicely. Just going to give that a minute. In the meantime, though, I'm going to get a base coat down on the swords. And of course, they're super easy. Just run it along the length of the blade, flip, repeat, and then just check it from the top and bottom of the blade to make sure nothing got missed. I will want 2 coats on the blade. I want to make sure I got a nice, solid, even base coat. Again, we're just going to let all that dry, come back in, get a second coat on it, and then we can get into detailing. Alright, I went ahead and put the second coat on because I don't really think you guys need to watch me do that. It's pretty evident it's just going to be the same thing twice. But you can see we've got a good solid color going now. I also realized that there's a couple other details I missed, which is this little emblem should also be metallic, as well as there's a little shuriken just kind of hanging right here, you know, by the loincloth. It's actually more evident on the front here. And so I went ahead and just base coated that as well. So basically everything is ready to go now that needs some detailing. So what we're going to do is 2 different processes here. On the clothing aspects, I'm going to be using just Nuln oil gloss. And that's really about it. There's not much more to it than that. I'll probably come in with a final highlight later on with some Runefang steel, but this is most of the process for the actual armor. It's pretty straightforward. Now, the swords are a little bit of a different story. I was looking at the box art a little bit closer, and one thing you'll notice is that the blade is very, very shiny and bright and has that sort of purple tinge of the outside edges. But it looks like the flat of the blade is darker. And it's a little hard to tell if that's a trick of just the camera or if it's intentional. Like this one here, both the blade, the sharp edge, and the flat of the blade are the same color. So it looks like they've been painted the same. And it's just a source of direct light making these ones look a lot brighter. But it could also be that they've painted the blade very, very bright and have made the flat of the blade a little bit darker and just goofed up on this model. You know, there's not a really easy way to tell just from box art, right? You can't really get the sense of how the metallics are working without being able to rotate the model. So we've basically got the option of making the flat of the blade darker if we want. I'm going to kind of make a judgment call on that after I've painted the rest of the blade and see how it looks. If I do, though, that's either going to be a simple coat of Nuln oil gloss, just kind of focused on this side, or I might even use some Basilicanum Gray from Contrast, which works really well for tinting metal as well. So let's get started first on the armor part, and then we'll work into the blades after that. So let's give my Nuln oil gloss a little shake, make sure it's not separated. Pop it open. And here I'm going to start up on the shoulder pad. The Nuln oil gloss, the reason I really like it is it has a lower surface tension, so it kind of really runs into those crevices a lot nicer. Also, it's shiny like the metallic itself is. You know, that's where the gloss comes in. And the one thing I've never liked about using the normal Nuln oil over metallics is that you lose some of the shine of the metallic when the Nuln oil dries. And so the gloss kind of helps, you know, combat that effect. There's actually a tiny little bit in here I think is supposed to be like a fabric strap holding the shoulder pad in place. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going to, again, reflect on the box art afterwards and see. If I determine that's the case, I'll make sure that I point that out when I do the video featuring the fabric straps, which will be a little bit further down the road on this series. Now with the Nuln oil, you can let it just kind of ever so slightly sort of spill off the edge of the metal. So like here, there's a little crease between the metal and the clothing. And I'm just letting the Nuln oil just ever so slightly pool over that to help create a bit of an outline. Same here, even between the metal and the skin. If I just let a little bit of the Nuln oil kind of just pool over the edge, then I get a nice, you know, sharp black line around the metallics. And it just helps with the overall visual you know, appeal of the model by having just some stark, you know, darker outlines happening. I'm just going to bring this same wash onto the little emblem here. I'm not going to worry about it on the shuriken. The shuriken's a small flat object. All I'm going to do is bring just a little bit around the outside of it to help shade it and make it distinct from the clothing. You know, basically I'm just making an outline around the clothing. And on the back side, I'm not even going to worry about that because the clothing is much, much darker on the back. I didn't really highlight it whatsoever. So it's already, you know, a fairly dark division. I don't need to worry about it. Just coming under this arm one more time. Gonna let that pool up. And we're just gonna again give that a few minutes to dry and see how it looks. Alright, now that's not fully dry, but it's really, really close. It's certainly enough that I can move on and start working on the rest of the model without worry about accidentally bumping it or anything weird like that. So what I'm gonna do here is bring a little bit of the Nuln oil gloss out to just fill this groove in the blade and separate the blade from the hilt. Just, you know, create a little division here. There's also, they're very, very hard to see. There's a couple tiny little spikes. Actually, they're much easier to see on this blade. And I'm going to just give them a quick little hit of the Nuln oil gloss just to outline them. And then we're going to work the Druchii violet into the edge of the blade to give it that sort of ethereal, shiny appearance. So again, just starting with the Nuln oil. This is really straightforward at this point. And I probably don't have to show you this, but might as well. Just going to, you know, lightly hit those two little spikes, come around the edge of the blade, and just take a little bit of this and, you know, just bring it down along this line. And I want to just obviously do the same on the other side of the blade as well as the second blade. Now the bottom of the blade I'm a little less concerned with. You know, it doesn't need to look really hyper detailed because no one's really going to see that, but this other blade, both sides are held upright, so it matters much more here. And here I've got a little bit of the Nuln oil on the outside of the blade, so I'm just wiping it away with a fingertip. And again, just bring that up and through here. And you could also use this to sort of dull this flat surface, but I don't actually think it's necessary. I don't think we need to. So what I'm going to do now is put that away, give my brush a quick rinse, and we're going to get out some Druchii violet. And all I want to do here is take a little bit of this. I'm just going to apply it, starting sort of with the edge of the blade, and I'm just following along the curve of the blade and making sure I don't get up onto that flat surface. And what you'll notice is wherever you pull the brush up, you're going to leave a tiny little pool. So what you want to do is you want to come from sort of the inner edge of the blade and pick up the brush towards the outside edge. And you'll leave a little dot there. You can kind of feather that around or even pull it right to the edge of the blade. But depending on how fluid your Druchii violet is, sometimes that little dot will kind of even itself out. Like in that case, you can see it kind of started to smooth out. It wasn't quite as prominent. And that's all we really want. It's a very subtle tint. We're not going for like a big purple shiny spot. We just want a little hint of color. And what you can do is let that dry, come in and do a second coat. It doesn't take long for it to dry because it's such a thin amount. So you lay down the color. And again, just kind of pull it towards that outside edge. And you can repeat that as many times as you want, depending on how purple you want it to look. Right now, I'm pretty happy with that. You know, it's indirect light here. You can see you lose the purple, it just goes almost pure white. But when viewed obliquely, you get a nice little purple hint to it. You can also do the same just on the opposite edge of the blade here. You know, just bring a little bit of it and pull it away at that corner. And so that sort of focuses the purple, you know, tightest out here. And I'm just going to repeat that on the opposite blade. So we're just going to, you know, start about a third of the way up the blade, bring it out, and kind of just let it pool towards the end here again. And then opposite direction, just like that. Really not much more to it. It's pretty subtle. We can reverse, do this side of the blade as well. And we're just going to go just quick strokes. There's not a lot to it. You can see I'm just passing over a few times, just making sure it's nice and smooth. That's all I'm passing over more than once for. I'm not building up layers. What I'm doing is just pushing the paint around to make sure that it's not, you know, I don't have a little dot of it. I've got, you know, a fairly even application that kind of feathers out towards the edges. And you can see that's basically already dry. It goes pretty quick because it is such a thin coat. Here I'm going to just bump it up a little. I want a little more effect from it, so I'm going to add another layer here. So one there. Another one out this way. You can see now I'm actually starting to get a purple tint to the blade instead of just sort of a... It's less of a hint of color, and now it's actually kind of, you know, toned that way. I'm starting to get to the point where even in direct light there's a little bit of purple noticeable. And again, I can just do the same thing over here. Just add another pass of the Druchii Violet, pull it away, stop at that outside edge. You know, here I've actually got a little, you can see a little dot of it almost pooled up, and I don't really want that. And that is part of the, I guess I'll say the danger of working with washes is they do, you know, they don't dry necessarily where you put them the way a paint does. They do have a little, you know, capillary action of their own. They do kind of, you know, follow their own little path. And that can backfire on you, or, you know, it can work really well. It's sort of the thing they're designed to do is also what makes them not necessarily suitable for certain tasks. So next up, I'm just going to take a little bit of Runefang steel, and I just want to clean the blade up a little bit. You can see the purple did kind of creep up a little onto the flat of the blade. So I'm going to use this to highlight that edge between where I've done the purple highlight and the flat of the blade. And also I'm going to use it to highlight just the very, very sharp edge of the blade. So we're going to use Runefang steel for all of that. Now this is a pretty small blade, so it can be a little challenging to do this. Just coming along, you know, between the purple and that sort of groove in the blade. And I'm sort of using the side of the brush here so that I kind of cover the whole blade simultaneously. There we go. So we just want to kind of bring that around, cover up the little bit of purple that got up onto that flat surface. And now using the edge of the brush, I just want to pass it along this sharp edge very briefly, and that'll just give it a nice, really sharp highlight. Really brings to mind just how, you know, dangerous this blade is supposed to be. And there we go. So you can see a nice glint on the edge of the blade now. And you can also, you can do that on the opposite side here. It's not really a sharp side of the blade, you know, it's quite a, in fact, quite dull. So it's quite wide here, but it adds some visual impact to the blade, so it's up to you if you do it or not. It's pretty quick and easy to do, though. I just want to make sure that's carried all the way to the corner. There we go. So again, I'm just going to come back here, repeat on this blade as well. Just got a little bit here where the purple kind of got up onto the flat, so we're just going to paint over that quickly. And then grab this edge, just highlight all the way around. Now this one, because this blade is held upright, I want to make sure the whole, you know, the edge when viewed sort of face on is fully covered, because you don't want, you know, a nice light line here, a nice light line here, but then the blade itself when viewed straight on has sort of a darker middle section. You want it to look continuous because that'll make it look the sharpest. And then we can just repeat here. Again, you can see a lot of the purple actually got up onto the flat here. So I'm just going to bring that around. And we're just going to hit that same highlight from this side. So the last thing I want to do here is I've still got my original Leadbelcher, or in this case the Warcolours Pewter, on my wet palette here. I'm just going to pick a little bit of that back up, and I just want to use it to very lightly, you can see it's, you know, it's pretty thin because it's been sitting on my wet palette for a few minutes, and so it's got a little translucency to it. What I want to do is just come back here and just kind of lightly feather the purple back into the blade just a little bit. Just makes it look a little less stark. And the reason for that is the purple is actually quite flat compared to the metallic. You know, the Druchii area actually isn't very shiny. And so this just helps enhance the shine a little bit. So I'm just using a very, very thin coat of slightly, you know, slightly thinned down Leadbelcher here. Alright, and there we go. Now, the last thing I could do is I could bring a little bit of the Runefang in and start adding some highlights back into the armor here. So I'm going to do that very quickly just to improve the visual appeal of a few spots. So here we've got the Runefang ready, and I'm just going to get a little bit here, and I'm just going to hit a few points. Like the sort of the sharp little point here on the corner of the corner of the shoulder pad. You know, sort of places that maybe have a little bit of visual impact, so kind of like around the collar. You know, we're lighten that up just a touch. Just a little bit on the chest here. And that's just to make it look a little curved again. It did flatten down a little bit visually by adding the Nuln oil gloss to it. And this sharp corner here on the armor as well. And just like the sword, I want to just sort of bring it around this edge, make it look nice and sharp. And we'll do that on both the front and the back. On the back it's a little harder because of the hair. But there we go. And a few more spots. This is sort of the ornate trim of the arm. I'm just going to hit that a little bit. And same for the shoulder. Just kind of pick that out. And that's really about it. Now you could, if you wanted to, come into this bigger flat kind of area of the shoulder pad and kind of just bump up the color a little bit. No need to, but no need not to either. It really just depends how much time you want to spend highlighting this armor. You know, you can go a little further. That does make it look really shiny though, just bringing that extra little bit in. So I'm actually pretty happy I just did it. There we go. We're gonna stop there. I think that's plenty of work on the silver metallics. You could again, sorry, I keep saying I'm almost done and then I realize something else I want to do here. So last thing I'm gonna do is just add a little bit of a highlight just to the top of this emblem. Make it have a little sort of a curved appearance to it. The eye in the middle is actually going to end up being gold, so I'm just leaving it alone, and the bottom I'm just not going to deal with. And depending on how much work you want to put in, you could, you know, put a little bit onto the shuriken to make it look extra sharp too, but at the same time, it's a pretty minor detail in the model, and you maybe just don't want to draw attention to it. So that's totally up to you what you do with that. But there is the silver metallics. Next up, we're going to work on the gold, so that's going to be the mask, a lot of the trim, the handles. So next I'm going to work on the gold metallics. That's going to be the mask, the trim, the top knot here, a whole lot of little details. The trim around the eye, the center eye itself, and the pommel and hilt of the swords. So this is going to be a big one. Hey, if you enjoyed this video here on YouTube, please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you get notifications when I post new videos. You can also join me at twitch.tv/epicduckstudios on Thursday, Friday, and Sunday evenings at 8:30 p.m. Eastern for live painting and sculpting shows. If you'd like to support this show, you can do that at patreon.com/epicduck. Every little bit helps cover the cost of paint, models, and all my video production gear, but more importantly, it helps keep food in my kid's belly and a roof over his head. I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons and Twitch subscribers, both past and present. Your ongoing support and encouragement is really what makes this possible. Thanks for watching, and until next time, do something epic.